Hello, everybody, and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. If you're listening to this on the audio and you're not a regular YouTube watcher, we're back in the studio, James.
It's fucking exciting.
Guess who's back?
Actually.
Guess who's back? Sitting around the same table.
It's nice to see you, sweetheart.
Finally here. 4 days before I kick your ass at FPL again. This is Tuesday, the People's Poll, James. We put a poll out. And the people have voted. Do you want to run down the options?
Yeah, I told you this one would win, and it doesn't surprise me. So the three options were captaincy planning, how long should we look ahead? I'd probably suggest with people picking up coronavirus, etc. at the moment, we probably shouldn't look too far at the moment, probably not beyond game week 4, actually. New signings was looking to potentially do an assessment of the new signings, the people like Salisu, Allen, people that maybe don't know as much about Harvard,
not so much the flagships in the Werners and all those guys. But
Donny
van de Beek,
them as well.
Guys.
What could we expect? A few of the patrons had asked for us to have a look at it as an idea in terms of how we think they'll fit in structurally more than actually their FPL returns necessarily. But a clear winner, not a surprise to me, was the guys want to hear what our current drafts is or are and what our reasoning behind it is.
Great. And there's a difference between us. You are 95% locked in, barring any, obviously, issues that we may have around transfers, injuries, COVID-related news, like we heard with Riyad Mahrez. Was it Mahrez and Laporte yesterday? Look, you weren't picking those bastards in game week 1 anyway, so what difference does it make?
Laporte, one or two, maybe. I think a few are having obviously a rethink now about Foden and Greenwood. Mm-hmm. Following them, trying to go on the poll in Iceland. Naughty boys. At least they had the sense to do it on a different floor, right?
Yeah. To be honest, mate, when I read the headline, Foden and Greenwood try and pick up girls in Iceland, I felt like that was me 20 years ago when I was at uni, mate. We'd go down Iceland in between the ice cream mart and fucking frozen nuggets. Used to always chat up girls, but you know.
So that takes Mum's Gone to Iceland to a whole new level, doesn't it?
So let's go through your draft first, because I think you're way more locked in than I am, although I would say I'm 70% locked in, and there's a few variables that may move for me. Where are you up to? Do you want to go through your 15, start from the back, move to the front?
So keepers Ryan and Walton for me at the moment. I'm debating the idea of not going Walton, and at the moment, the keeper I'd be considering is Johnson of West Brom. Just thinking behind, do I want to pay the extra 0.5, basically just to give me the cover of if something happens through COVID? I really feel like the closer we get to the start of the season, the more I feel like things are going to fuck up, actually. So that's, to be honest, that's the only reason for spending 0.5. Plus, as I stand at the moment, I'm leaving 2 million in the bank.
Yep.
So the theory of going Ryan Walton comes down to two things. The one for considering Johnson as the alternative is basically if it then becomes clear to me that one 4.5 and 4.0 option is better than the other, I can go Ryan to Button, or I can go Johnson to Walton. So
Correct.
I'm opening out the idea originally. But it's also not a transfer I particularly want to make. So at the moment, I'm going Ryan and Walton. The reason for going Ryan is it's not necessarily even a case that I think it's the best 4.5 and 4.0 combination. It's actually, I want a goalkeeper for 16 game weeks. And looking further ahead, game week 16 is obviously the last chance to use the first wild card. In game week 16, Brighton play Arsenal. In game week 17, they play Wolves. In game week 18, they play Manchester City. In game week 19, they're away to Leeds. That's essentially the fixtures that I'm missing out on Brighton. The hardest fixtures they've got over that period on paper is basically what they start with. Chelsea at home, then Manchester United at home in game week 3. So for the whole 16 game week period and the value that he offers at 4.5, I still think, for me, in my circumstance, Ryan is the best choice.
Okie doke.
And I think Walton, as we discussed on yesterday's pod, is an upgrade on Button, and he will potentially put some pressure on. And should he be needed, he's all right.
Defensively, Trent and Robbo on this podcast, we have done to death. So
Doesn't need explaining.
It doesn't even need talking about. How much money are you putting into the rest of your defence?
So at the moment, I've got, and I'm probably going to be unusual in this circumstance, I've got 3 4.5 million defenders.
Yep.
I have Walker Peters, Charlie Taylor, and Luke Ayling. Ayling for me is the gamble, and the reason I say it's the gamble because I think he's the best Leeds United asset, but we've been in this circumstance before where we've gone promoted club, that's the best asset, and boom, they've gone and bought someone else. Not to this late extent, but we obviously all had this when Barry Douglas come up with Wolves a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
Oh, Barry Douglas is going to be the one. His price comes out too high. Then they buy Johnny anyway, and Douglas has gone on loan to Leeds, obviously now permanent. So I think with a club like Leeds, and particularly the promoted clubs, you need to know that there's a possibility that these guys will still go and buy. Even if they're not being linked with someone now, there's nothing to say that something won't come up even in a loan market where they go, that's a good opportunity to get a fullback there, we'll go and take him. Now, there's no suggestion that's going to happen, but I just think, do we know factually that Leeds definitely don't want to buy someone to play in that position? We don't.
No.
So he's the gamble from that perspective for me. He pairs with Charlie Taylor, who was always going to be my number one choice from the 4.5s. I happily sit him on the bench game week 1. And Cole Walker-Peters edges in because obviously I was looking at the Ryan McCarthy rotation. Walker-Peters has a nice game week 1, whereas Taylor has no game. Ayling obviously has a difficult fixture at Liverpool. It allows me to make, if I leave it at those 5, which I'd like to do as long as possible, allows me week-to-week decisions in terms of changing them for whatever needs I have. Put it this way, I'm not going to be in a position at any point between the 3 of them where it's going to look disastrous, where they've all got a difficult fixture. It's going to be fine.
And you're very much fixed on a 3 at the back.
Yeah, I mean, I can pick
Maybe
2.
4,
I can pick 2
but generally
of them.
3.
But I mean, the only guy in my 15 who I've got who I don't think is an automatic first choice is Walton.
Mm-hmm.
So I am going to be able to make week-to-week changes. There could be a week where, I don't know, St. Maximin's got a difficult fixture, Soucek's got a difficult fixture, and 2 of those back guys have got nice fixtures, and I think, okay, fine.
Yep.
It could be that it becomes obvious that, I don't know, say, for example, Ayling became the new Doherty. Then suddenly I think, well, if I'm going to have this guy, I need to be playing him every week, in which case I'll downgrade to one of the 4.0s, which I just don't think is, I don't think any of them are going to do anything, to be honest. Or I can move up as well. The money in the bank is part planning the game week 1 moves where I need to find an extra million and then there's no pressure on it. I'm also probably likely to make an extra 0.5 when I sell Aubameyang for De Bruyne in game week 3. So I still think that I'm going to be coming into game week 4 with around about 1.5 million in the bank. But this does allow me flexibility for mistakes. Plus, I'm obviously on a long-term strategy. I'm not going to be wildcarding in game week 4 unless it's a complete clusterfuck. So it's allowing me that flexibility to... This is where I think a little bit the Sky management comes in for me. Holding that money back. It's something we're used to doing in Sky because of no fluctuation in prices. This has also given me the buffer to not feel like I have to make early transfers as well. I can wait to make the correct decisions. So my idea with the keepers in the back 5, really, I would like to not touch that till game week 16. I'm pretty sure that I will.
Yeah, of course.
I'm very sure that I will, but I'd like to
know that whatever the best laid plans of mice and men and all that, right? So even when I'm looking at my team, I've been building my squad thinking, yeah, he's got a good long-term. I'm like, why do I keep thinking like I'm not going to make
Your opinion
any
will
transfers?
change. Your opinion will change.
It's mad. So having flexibility is quite important as well. What have you got across the middle?
Aubameyang is the obvious. He's going to be my game week 1 captain. He's highly likely to be my game week 2 captain. Then, as I've already said, I'd likely move to...
Game week 2? He's getting smashed in game week 2, mate.
Yeah, all right, mate. Then I'd likely move to De Bruyne in game week 3. It's a transfer that many of us are considering at the moment. I'm going to go Mane at the moment. It's not even a preference of Mane versus Salah, although the regular listeners will know I don't enjoy owning Salah. Mm-hmm. I think Salah is probably more likely of the 2 to go mental on Saturday. However, the idea that I'm captaining Aubameyang, Mane is offering up the greater differential. I'm just going to completely swing against it, knowing that in any one game week, either one of them will better the other one. And the intention is to sell Mane in game week 2 for Bruno Fernandes at the moment. So it's literally Mane in as a placeholder for the 1 game week for me with one of the best fixtures on paper. And obviously a high capability. I don't feel it's worth looking down at people like Ziyech at less, for example, and then spreading that money differently. I think, no, I'll go Mane as a very good differential for game week 1. And no matter what he does, he's getting sold. He could get a hat-trick on game week 1. He's still getting sold. And that's where I mentioned this to the patrons yesterday about if you're having a strict plan like this, which I'm not saying you should necessarily do, stick to that plan. Don't be blinded. We had that question a couple of weeks ago. What if Aubameyang gets 5 in the first 2 game weeks?
Still going for Kevin De Bruyne.
He's still getting out, mate. Like, if that's your plan, it doesn't mean you can't change your mind. But I think I wouldn't think, oh shit, he's done that in them 2 games. Now I have to keep him. Like, he's going to keep up his rate of 2 goals per game. It's probably not going to happen. Rest of the midfield is St. Maximin and Armstrong. I can't split. I genuinely can't split them to know which one's best. So at the moment, they're both in. Well aware that in future game weeks, one of them is likely to change. Soucek is in. And Soucek, for me, is staying in, irrespective of whether he's fit for the weekend or not. My belief is he's comfortably the best at that valuation below 5.5 million. My intention for many of the upcoming game weeks was probably not to start with him. He is the guy that I want sitting there ready, genuinely, as my first sub most game weeks. And if he's not available for this weekend because of this potential isolation threat from his trip away with the Czech Republic, then it means changing something else rather than him.
Are you intending in game week 1 to play all 5 or 4 of those?
The intention at the moment would be to play all 5 because my intention at the moment is to start with Chris Wood,
right,
who is unavailable.
Right, okay.
So that would be...
3-5-2.
Yep. So Wood unavailable week 1, and then Soucek probably becomes the one unavailable for game week 2. And then I can assess on a week-to-week basis. It might be that St. Maximin proves to be... I think he's kind of, although his ownership's decent, he's a punt for all of us. There's expectation on him. I think the FPL returns haven't shown it previously. It's an eye test punt, basically. I'm surprised his ownership is as high as what it is. It could be that I'm completely wrong about what his capability is. In which case, fine, he can come down to a 4.4 midfielder or something. Then I'm playing Soucek regularly. Armstrong can become Greenwood's area, for example. There's lots of potential. He's more. What I want to do is I want to play around with these guys at the front, which I'm happy to do. Plus, obviously, with me going Danny Ings as well, at the moment I'm starting with triple Southampton. I don't see that lasting very long.
Yeah.
So I think it's a decision. If I don't want to play around with the defence, one of Armstrong or Ings will become a sacrifice at some point, probably within the first 5 to 6 game weeks, I would think.
Okay. And St. Maximin, Armstrong and Soucek, barring anything like you just mentioned, are there, and you don't really want to muck around with them if they're returning. It's the Aubameyang and Mane that you want to move on in the first couple of game week 2, game week 3.
I'm happy to be moving around St. Maximin and Armstrong if they're not performing.
Okay.
I think they offer great value at the start.
Give them a couple of weeks, though? 2-3 weeks?
Yeah, I should think so. I mean, my thoughts at the moment, I've kind of laid out what my transfers are up to game week 4. So they're going to get the 4 game weeks, really, most likely. I can't split them in terms of a choice. If someone said to me, pick one, I'm not sure I can split them. I think Armstrong has the numbers to back up his possibility, but has a little bit of a threat to his first team place. Even with the sign of Fraser and Callum Wilson, there's no danger to St. Maximin. And them players becoming available makes him a better asset. Whereas I think he was getting into the stage with them where it was going to become a little bit like it became with Zaha at Palace, where he was just going to get systematically targeted. Yeah. Now I think he's, with the threat of Fraser on one side, Almiron through the middle, there's enough directness in Newcastle's play that means people can't just target him in the way Zaha had been targeted. I'd like to see him come in the middle and see him play in areas where he played against Tottenham in game week 35. I think he could do serious damage. He's capable of running the game for Newcastle. Soucek, though, is the one that will stay, Suj. I'm very comfortable with that. There's a little bit of me that thinks, I hope he's unavailable game week 1, because it will just completely take him away from other people are thinking it.
Yeah, but remember, mate, 7.7% ownership.
Yeah.
He's still very lowly owned. We think in our Twitter bubble that he's highly owned. He ain't highly owned, mate. 7.7 no. is low, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. So you mentioned Chris Wood is one of your strikers, and you mentioned Danny Ings. So you've got Chris Wood, Danny Ings. I think both are pretty self-explanatory. The third one?
Antonio. The plan is, again, it's 1 week punt. The plan is to sell him for Martial as part of a -4 for game week 2. I like Mane and Antonio as the pairing for my game week 1 punts. That then allows me to bring Wood into the team game week 2, ready to go. and then Soucek can drop out of the team. Now, the plan, if Soucek's unavailable, is to drop Wood and go with Mitrovic instead.
Right, okay.
That's the plan. And that's the only thing that I can see really changing this at the moment, bar injuries, COVID, or transfers amongst these squads that are going to change my opinion. That's why what I meant by Soucek. What happens with Soucek doesn't affect my decision on him. It impacts the decision on Wood versus Mitrovic. Right now, that's the final call. And if Soucek's fit to play for game week 1, I'll run with that. I really like the idea of Chris Wood. It's a difficult fixture in game week 2 against Leicester. He's 3.4% owned. A lot of my picks are quite template. So I like the idea of having that differential ready to go in game week 2. I think he'll do really well this season, Chris Wood.
Interesting team, James. I think one of the things that people will call you out on, which they will.
Oh, there'll be loads getting called out on. It's my team. I don't give a shit.
Lack of Chelsea.
Yes, lack of Chelsea. The listeners will know I want to watch it. I think Brighton is a more difficult fixture than it looks in game week 1. And I think system-wise, they might set up very differently for that game to how they set up.
Saw in the highlights in All or Nothing when you played them, and Webster and were clearing all the balls and defence in All or Nothing. You beat them in the end, didn't you? But still, it was a tough game.
There's a lot of Spurs games from over that Christmas period I've kind of deleted from my memory, sir. This being one of them.
We were deleted from All or Nothing as well.
That's true.
The way you slid from 5th in the table down to 8th or 9th in such a glossy way was like as if it was fantastic. But back to the point is that game against Brighton will be tough for Chelsea.
Yes, Brighton and Chelsea was 1-1 on New Year's Day. I mean, Spurs only played for 15 minutes on that day over Christmas.
For City, and they spanked them, didn't they?
Yeah, there is that, and I think there's a lot of recency bias to think City went there and got 5, Liverpool went there and got 3, Man United went there and got 3 and should have got more. So should Liverpool as well, in fairness. So in the fixtures in the restart period against the bigger opposition, they've been given a bit of a slap.
I also think
they'll be very aware of that.
Safety, and so you had that little bit of kind of complacency, or just thinking, you know what, shit, at least we're not getting down this year. So that you could
flip it the other way and say they beat Arsenal.
Yeah,
they still did it.
I
think they'll be very aware of what happened to them in those games. It's a new start, new season. You would expect Chelsea to go there and win, don't get me wrong. And I do think if you've got Werner, you're saying you're probably going to captain him, we'll come on to. I think that's absolutely fine for game week 1. I want to watch them. I think they'll probably play 2 different, slightly different styles in the Brighton and Liverpool games, which gives me an assessment of how they're likely to play against, let me say, mid-table team and title challenging team, which then gives me an idea in terms of game week 3. And it might be once I get to game week 3, Aubameyang to De Bruyne doesn't look like the move for me anymore. It might look like it's something else. Danny Ings to Werner, for example, which the money would be there to do that with that extra 1 million. So I've got my eye on them. Good. And obviously Havertz is coming at what looks a great price at 8.5 million. The recommendation for me would be not to start with him. If you've got the cojones, good luck with it. And obviously waiting to see news on Pulisic's injury. So yeah, they are absolutely on my radar. I don't anticipate it'd be very long till I get one, but I want to make sure I start with the right one, I think. And I'm not desperate to do it for those first 2 fixtures personally.
Cool. Should we look down my 15 then, James?
Let's do it.
Starting at the back, at the moment, I've got Ramsdale and Nyland. Ramsdale, just set and forget. They've got some very good fixtures to start with. I mean, Wolves at home will be tough, but I anticipate that game being a low-scoring game. And then Villa, Leeds, Fulham, I'd expect them to clean sheets. It wouldn't surprise me if they blocked out Arsenal, albeit that's away. In that Arsenal game, and then you've got Liverpool, City, Chelsea, I'm hoping at least save points or what have you. I'm not looking at clean sheets, but then after that, they've got a very, very, very solid run. They have Sheffield United. So for me, he's a real set and forget. He's decent on pens. It's a downgrade on Henderson, no doubt, but I don't think it's like the biggest downgrade.
Do you think you'll wildcard early or not?
So, if I wildcard early, it's because the house is burning down. It's not like a few small areas. It's like my whole strategy.
That's where I'd have to be, yeah.
So, take this as a strategy. This is the way I have been approaching my squad. I want to score 2,400 points. Now, that's a lot of points to
You'll
get in a
nearly win FPL.
Exactly. So I'm reverse engineering what it takes to win FPL, right? My record points is 2,200 and something. So even if we landed at 2,300, still a hell of a good season, taking averages. We spoke about captaincy points where I'd scored last year, I think 530 odd, you were at 460. So I'm going to say that 500 points from captaincies is okay for the season. That means 1,900 points from my 10 players, which means 190 points per player over the course of a season. That's a hell of a lot of points. Last season, there were only 10 players.
Say, good luck getting 190 points off Ramsdale.
There were only 10 players.
Waiting to get to the
here's
punchline.
The thing, right? There were only 10 players last season in the whole game that scored more than 190 points. Yeah. And I can tell you what, 3 of them are 12 million and 2 of them are 11.5. So,
and the other 2 are Trent and Robertson, probably.
When you break it down like that, you think about it, the importance of getting the right players at the right time is really key. 190 points per player is an average of 5 points per week. So I was trying to figure out where's the best price point for consistency. For example, 5.5 million defenders consistently score more points than 5.5 million midfielders, and definitely more than 5.5 million attackers. So where I haven't got any premiums in my squad, I'm looking for the right value point. Let me give you an example. 6 million defenders statistically haven't done particularly well, but there's not that many defenders in that bracket. But you look at this year, Doherty did well. He's the outlier. Pereira had a very injury-ridden season, and the City defence
did Laporte. Yeah,
City defence was garbage. But 5.5 and 5 million defenders do very well. 4.5 million defenders, James. How many defenders in the game now at 4.5 million scored more than 100 points last year?
None.
And how many 4 million defenders scored even more than 20 points last season, James? Sod all. So you said something in the game a couple of days ago that you think all the 4 million stuff is dross. There isn't a single player that scored more than 20 points all season at 4 million. So it makes me think that that's just fodder, 4 million.
I mean, to be fair, you got someone like Ferguson who wasn't playing in the league.
Yeah,
right? So...
and there will always be new players that came into the game and what have you. But there's a big jump from 4.5 million defenders to 5 and 5.5 million defenders, 50 to 60 points. You're going from 80, 90 points over a season to 130, 140 points a season. I was building my squad based on looking for those value points and then the points per million. So
Can I
I've ended up...
jump in and say one thing, just a little bit of a flaw with what you're saying. I know what you're saying, but the idea that a 4.5 can't, for example, I mean, you only have to look at...
Yeah, because they get a price rise.
You only have to look at Lundstrom last year, right? Was 4 and has got, 100 and something odd points, 130 or something.
There's the odd outlier. But the point is that in the early stages, we need to find them, pick them, jump on them, and be done with it.
Doherty obviously was... 144 points in his first season with Wolves.
Yep.
And Charlie Taylor obviously come well under last year. I don't know how many points he got.
80 points last year.
70, 80 points, yeah. But it's only in a little bit over half a season. Yeah. So if he played the whole season, I think it's fair to assume that he's probably getting towards at least, say, 120.
Yeah. But in the early stage of the season where we don't know, this is the biggest thing, right? We have so little information. If you go up to 5 million in terms of defenders, there is a handful of defenders that scored more than 130, 140 points.
All right, let me ask you, how many clean sheets do you think Burnley will keep this year?
It's a very good question. I look at Burnley and I'm like, how comes the defenders are scoring so few points when Pope and Tarkowski scored so many points, and then there's a real drop off to others because they're not getting full season's worth of minutes and what have you. I don't know. I think 11, 12.
Okay, let's say 10. Say 10. So let's say Charlie Taylor plays them 10. No bonus, no attacking returns, nothing. 60 points, yeah? Mm-hmm. You got 28 games left. Fair? Yeah. Put another 2 points on them 28 games.
That's 56.
Right. So 126. Now, there's going to be a couple of bookings, but it's going to be a couple of attacking returns. There's going to be some bonus points.
A few, maybe, yeah.
So, is that a reasonable assessment? 126 points for Charlie Taylor?
Yep, it's not bad.
All right, well, I'll take that.
But I think if you jump up a little bit more, the jump up in points could be potentially quite a lot more as well, like a Tierney, for example. But I've set up at the moment with Robertson, Trent, as we know. I've got Doherty at 6 million, who I think will be a good option.
Go on, Matt.
Consistency. And I think Tierney as well at 5.5 million. For the first 2 or 3 game weeks, look, Fulham and West Ham, if nothing else, are 2 decent fixtures to start with. If I see that he's bombing forward and creating chances, then he'll sit there for a little while. If he doesn't, I can go down to 4.5, Charlie Taylor or whoever else. Tyreek Mitchell's in there at 4 million because I need to go cheap, because I've spent so much money in my defence and goalkeeper already in Ramsdale and what have you. I'm going to jump up front and leave my midfield last, if I may.
Okay.
Werner.
Yeah.
Vardy.
Yeah.
Ings. Vardy's a placeholder for Martial.
This is interesting because
whether or not he stays there is a question mark.
We discussed yesterday, you had someone else in that place, and I said to you, I think you should go Vardy.
Yeah, I'm not sold on it yet, but I have money left to burn, so I may make that move.
I think, go with Vardy for the 1 week, mate, and then take the hit for Martial if you want to. I don't think just put Martial in that place to start with.
Maybe.
I think the thing is, it's always the fear of, well, if he blanks, it's costing me the 4 points to make the transfer. That's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is he goes to West Brom and gets a hat-trick.
I really don't care what happens in the first 3 to 4 weeks here. As long as I don't have disastrous 20-20-20-20 in terms of points. As long as I'm hitting between 40 and 60 consistently. If you said to me you get 200 points in the first 4 game weeks, 50 points a week right now, I'd take it.
You're far more likely to have a 20-point game week if you've got Anthony Martial sitting in your squad this week.
Potentially. I've still got Werner and Ings up front, right? Yeah. So I'm going to end up with a front line that's 8.5, 9 and 9.5.
Yeah.
Which is expensive again when you've got the likes of 6.5 million attackers.
To be honest, I'm all for that as a strategy. Like going with more expensive forwards this year.
Because they're not expensive.
I think it's a brilliant idea because the majority of people are looking to do it differently. So I think it's a great idea to be powering into a front three like Vardy, Martial and Werner to start with. I think it's a great idea. In a bad week,
I'll get a couple of goals out of the 3 of them. In a good week, they'll all fucking score and be filling my boots. So.
And on a bad week, none of them will score, mate. Just so you know.
Well, Werner, Ings and
There'll
Martial.
be game weeks where none of them score. It doesn't matter what combination you have.
None of them return.
You'll have a game week where none of them return, yes.
Low probability compared to
it will happen to everybody. I've
got midfield at the moment with Harrison Reed as a 4.5 placeholder and Soucek. Armstrong, I think Armstrong will offer more consistency than St. Maximin. I think he'll frustrate as much as he will, and I'm not scared to move to St. Maximin if he's tearing it up and all of a sudden Callum Wilson's banging in the goals and they look like a good attacking team. If I need to make that move,
I'm okay with that.
Dele Alli is in. He's a bit of a punt in the way that you're going Mane and Antonio. I think if he's playing up top close to Harry Kane, or even Son if Harry Kane doesn't start the season for whatever reason, if his COVID quarantining means they don't think he's quite ready to chuff.
Oh, Harry Kane will play. It's not in doubt.
Yeah, I think so.
It's no
so then,
danger.
Dele Alli for me
the only danger is he's playing Denmark tonight for England, and if he gets injured, that's the danger.
Or he gets on Tinder and invites some girls around his room.
Or that, yeah. I think in Harry Kane's case, it's probably quite unlikely. I would think like he's been. To be honest, if I heard that about Harry Kane, my first reaction would be he's been set up. I wouldn't believe it. So no, Harry Kane will start the weekend. It's no issue on that bar as long as he comes through the Denmark game unscathed.
It leaves me 10 million for a midfield slot, which eventually will be Kevin De Bruyne. So when I go from Vardy to Martial and what have you, it'll give me money and one other move I can make. I can get to it with a couple of moves. But the problem is there's very few players playing that I want to go for maybe necessarily. Like it'd be Son, but then I don't want to double up on Son and Ali. Harvey Barnes, but I don't want to double up on Vardy and Barnes. So I might take it as an opportunity to just go all out and get Havertz and take a risk on it on game week 1. Double up, be done with it. And then I've got Dele Alli and Havertz as 2 real differential picks that I'll try for game week 1, game week 2, and if they don't work out, then I'm still good with that. I feel like having a secure backline in Trent and Robbo and Ramsdale and Doherty and Tierney, and then the strong front line gives me the freedom to play flexibly with my midfield.
So what would your bench be game week 1 at the moment?
At the moment, it'd be Nyland in goal, but insert any 4 million. Harrison Reed, Soucek, and Tariq Mitchell.
Okay, yeah. That's why I think you need Vardy there rather than Martial as well. Suddenly, if you're leaving Martial out, and if Soucek's then unavailable, you're looking at starting Reed. Yeah. It's not how you want to start the season.
No.
I see people doing this. It's okay. It's not to say you can't, but I see people starting. I saw one draft yesterday that was lined up and it had a lot of power in it, but it was starting the season with 4.5 million midfielders in the team. And I thought, that's not how you want to start.
No.
It's not how you want to start. These guys are not there. There isn't a 4.5 million midfielder we can say he should be your regular starter.
Yeah.
Like the likes of Reed, Lamina, Bissouma, Stevens, any of them can potentially be okay, but you don't actually want to be in a position where you're going to be starting any of them unless Bissouma suddenly broke out as a goal-scoring midfielder, which is extremely unlikely, by the way. So, yeah, give yourself that power. Then at least then if you're stuck with Soucek there, that gives you a different choice. What you might end up doing if Soucek gets ruled out for the weekend is going another 4.5, and you might find that extra 0.5 comes in quite handy for you.
Further down the line,
might be a different way.
I think under 10 million, there are some very good midfield options. Rashford, Son, Pulisic, Havertz, Mahrez, Ziyech, Willian, Dele Alli, Mason Greenwood we haven't even talked about. And I just think that one premium out of the others is okay, because I'm also comfortable in any week captaining Werner, captaining Martial, captaining Trent if need be. So if I think that 11.5, I'll be honest with you, might not be De Bruyne. I'm 60-40. 40% of me is leaning towards Raheem Sterling, because everybody's going to be on De Bruyne. I think, you know what, why not go with a bit of Raheem Sterling?
You will buy De Bruyne.
Do you think so?
I know you will buy De Bruyne.
I don't know. It depends on what we see from City. I don't mind going with Sterling.
For you, because I know you, and we've sat here long enough doing this, all you'll need to see is Kevin De Bruyne play once. And he'll be in your squad, mate.
Yeah, but I mean, Raheem Sterling can just as easily...
Of course he can.
...tear it up in a couple of games. But I'm comfortable waiting. I don't know if you know, we've talked about when you get to the point where you're comfortable with your squad and strategy and structure. This is what I feel like now. I feel like I've spread myself across the squad, that there's players all around that I mean, anyone can have a bad week in any week. We all get a 30-point game week, but there's enough cover in places that 45 to 50 points as a baseline is okay. And I'll wait and watch for 3 or 4 weeks, and then I can make some moves. And if this strategy is falling apart and it's clear that you need 2 premium midfielders and then just go cheap in other places, I'll wildcard. It's not the end of the world.
I have a question.
There's no way I'll lose FPL in like first 4 game weeks.
Of your no, you can't. You can't win it at the start either.
Win it.
I have a question. Of your current starting 11 for game week 1, how many of them do you think will exceed 190 points over the season?
They won't, though, because it doesn't work like that, because only 10 players across the entire game did. So Trent and Robbo, I think, will exceed 190 points.
Yeah.
Werner, Martial will exceed 190 points. Danny Ings...
capable.
...is touch and go, will exceed 190 points. And then I think Doherty, Tierney and Ramsdale are in that 150 to 170 bracket.
I think that's optimistic.
Well, 150 is doable. I think 170 is definitely optimistic. And then Armstrong, Soucek, etc. we'll see. And then I've got a slot for a midfielder that can be at that 190 points value. De Bruyne, Sterling, whoever else. So I think 5 or 6 definitely can make that.
I think all you need to do, it's not criticism of your team at all. You've got a theory in terms of where these points are coming from. I think you need to have a second look at your team and ask if that's really where the points are coming from. That's the only thing. But I agree with you, the principal idea, which not a lot are talking about, the idea of captaining people like Alexander-Arnold, Martial, Werner, is a solid ploy. Because it's very reasonable that these guys will become very captainable. And therefore, if we can get in a team full of Son, Pulisic, Havertz, and still the premium defenders and the powerful front three, then yes, rather than saying is X essential, we can all look at the idea of going with no De Bruyne or Sterling, no Salah or Mane, no Aubameyang, no Bruno Fernandes maybe even, and looking at completely twisting on its head. It also gives you what I really like in terms of that setup is good access to Harry Kane and Sergio Aguero when the time's right. I like that as well. I mean, imagine that as a front three. The price you could play for Aguero, Martial and Werner is mad, really. Was it cost you about 30? It doesn't even cost you 30 million.
No.
Whereas if you want Salah and Mane together, it will cost you 24. I mean, if those front three were firing or Kane instead of any one of them three, for example, you've got amazing value there. So I like the idea of being really close to those guys at the top forward pricing area.
What's your thoughts on... I haven't done any research on this. You might have it off the tip of your tongue, and if you don't, then any other listeners can
doubt it.
Were there fewer goals...
How are they going to jump in?
No, on the comments and whatever. Were there fewer goals post-lockdown?
Oh, I think probably yes, but I don't know the numbers.
Okay. I'm just interested to see whether or not, because it's the start of the season and people are a little bit cagey and there's no crowds, etc., whether there'll be more clean sheets to be had than sometimes there is.
I think what you have to remember in terms of the restart period, the game week 30 onwards, was obviously everybody came back unfit. The tempo of those games in the first 2 to 3 game weeks, probably bar when I watched Southampton, was like a pre-season friendly in most games. All right, tackles were still going in, but everybody was retreating, wasn't they? There was no pressing of the ball. It was literally lose the ball, get into shape, and that's protect people on their fitness. Now, you might see an element of that to start this season. I think particularly from some of the promoted clubs, who perhaps like Fulham have not had much time to prepare. And that will evolve as the weeks go on. I think if the season starts like that, where everybody just retreats again, that won't last for long. Plus, it's slowly starting to get a little bit colder, and that's really, really going to help. The last few years, late August and September, fuck me, we're in September, it doesn't feel right previewing a football season. September has actually had some warm days, but we're mid-September, so autumn's very nearly here. So unusually for a football season, you're starting in cooler temperatures. That makes it easier for footballers. So I think what would maybe feel like the pre-season period, with like kind of what we had in game week 30, it won't last long. So I wouldn't go in with the thinking of we're likely to see a low number of goals. I think it will get back to the sort of level that we expect of around about 2.6 to 2.7 goals per game.
Interesting. And there we go. People's poll, that was our initial drafts. I think James, like he's mentioned, is much more locked in than I am. We've also had our champion from 2019, 2020. Let me get my years right. He shared his statistical model with our patrons and other people as well. If you want to jump on Martin Janssen on Twitter. I want to...
At FPL Stockholm on Twitter.
Yeah, I want to have a look at that as well. And I noticed that his starting 15 was very different to mine. In terms of he's powered in with, he's got Salah and Aubameyang. And I want to know what his model shows that makes him make that decision.
I can tell you exactly what it shows. Those two are the most likely to score fucking big in game week 1.
Yeah, I can understand
I don't need to look at the model to know that.
But what is it based on? Home advantage, away advantage? Is it based on the opposition? What is he ranking Fulham as? What is he ranking West Ham as? What is he ranking Leeds at? Etc. etc. There's more to it than literally they're going to do well, because historically they've done well. Piece it all together, and then on Friday when we come out with the final show, we will be pretty much locked in. I want to be locked in on Friday, so that I don't have to panic around on Saturday morning.
I'm going to do my stream on YouTube on Friday, hopefully after all the press conferences. This is my plan at the moment, so it might be later than usual. That's what I'd like to do, so I can start that and give you the full kind of press conference roundup, and then we get into questions. I'll stream for deadline Saturday as well. To be honest, if Soucek is fit for the weekend, I can't see that changing.
There we go. Guys, thank you for tuning into the podcast wherever you're listening, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher. Just hit the subscribe button and you'll get notified as soon as we put more content out. We have a podcast going out for you guys every day. And on top of that, if you need additional content, then do head over to patreon.com/planetfpl. We have an additional podcast per day for all of our Patreons. We also have a Slack channel, some prize leagues and much more there as well, which is a really useful, good place to interact with other FPL managers. On top of that, last week, reminder, correspondent week, there's 20 podcasts that went out last week, one for every single Premier League club. So if you're umming and ahhing over a specific player and you head over to those shows, it's highly likely that we will have talked about them in a little bit more detail with fans of those clubs and FPL players who know their onions.
Nothing else to add.
No.
Sky tomorrow.
Sky
and
Fantasy Football.
We're in the studio.
Yeah, we're back in the studio. Head over to YouTube and give us a like there where you can see us smiling at the camera. But most importantly, guys, right now, stay safe. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other. Cue music, please, man child.
The Fantasy Football Show.